Okay. So welcome to Serverless Toronto user group. Like we run these meetups almost 2.5 years now. This is our third virtual meetup. And like when we started, Jonathan and myself, that was like we were just regular backend developers playing with functions as a service. And before you knew it, we started gluing other people's APIs together, connecting to managed services. And it felt a lot like playing with Legos. And that enabled us to build MVPs and prototypes faster to deliver business values and empower business users, really. And also, like serverless backends give superpowers to the front-end developers, but not just mobile and web developers, also to the UX designers and to the voice first designers. And then when you look at, I have to admit somebody in. Yep, that's good. I have two screens. So when you look at this picture here, it's a mythical symbol that I borrowed from Dan Olson. He runs a Silicon Valley lean startup and UX group. And really in the middle, it's agility. So by doing serverless, we are becoming more agile, but not by sprinting faster like the Scrum tells you. It's about using bigger building blocks and doing less ops. So that's what we are about, how we started from the functions as a service to kind of advocating serverless mindset, to just play and build something useful. And the most of the meetups that we have are on these topics to enlighten you to have more Lego pieces. So for instance, if you don't know that there is a blue piece, like how can you build something if piece is missing? So the next meetup will be on the topic of graph databases, because there is lots of confusion about graph databases, graph SQL. So our guest from Amazon will present not just their answer as a managed service for graph databases, but also give you an overview so you can use that extra piece when you're building your models. And also, like I want to invite and welcome everybody who has anything to share to us. It doesn't have to be formal. It can be lightning talk. Our doors are open because we are all becoming better architects and builders and developers by sharing information. So somebody tried to get in and I didn't see that. So hopefully it's going to be okay. So unlike most of the meetups that we had, this meetup did not start, let's do something fun. It started off frustration, literally, like when COVID-19 started, like it turned the world upside down, like literally, like everything that was partially broken became fully broken, like from the healthcare system, retirement homes, companies laying off people, food banks. So hidden in a basement, like all I could do was tweet around and post this different advocacy, like pleas to the world. But then we are the engineers. That's not the way I can help. And one a long weekend, like it was end of March or beginning of April, like my mortgage payment bounced on Friday for 3 days. I could not talk to anybody from the bank. Branches were closed. Their IVR systems were completely broken. So that gave me the purpose that I want to organize this meetup and cover this topic. And I did reach to Twilio originally to do that. But like why I reached Twilio, they're not only game in town, but there is something, if you remember when COVID started, like most of the companies and people on social media were just kind of quiet as if nothing had happened, or like I call this leadership style like head in the sand, ostrich approach. Twilio wasn't like that, and like the reason why the Twilio turned into true leader when COVID-19 crisis hit was because helping was built into the fabric of the company. From the beginning of the company, part of the profit for Twilio.com went to Twilio.org, their branch. You see I circled it here, for helping communities around the world. So they were ready to lead us to jump into the process. However, because they were so busy helping our organizations, it took me like 2-3 months to start organizing this. And in the process, I see in the news that their stock is going up like crazy. So that means, that proves that doing good and making profits are not mutually exclusive, that you can do both and save the world. So our philosophies are in line. That's why I decided to do this meetup with Twilio. How we arrived to this particular topic, it's not my use case with the banking problem or some kind of mobile IVR payment. Let me admit somebody else. Yep. So we arrived to this topic by Patrick and Karla looking at the most common use cases they see nowadays, 4 months into the COVID-19 world, and identifying opportunities for do-it-yourselfers. Oh my God, these people are late. Organizing opportunities for do-it-yourselfers to help businesses around them to accept increased volume of calls. And I put this photo above here, like as a member of cloud teams migrating people in the cloud. It was like all or nothing, like migration of the nation, everybody goes to the cloud. Not this time. Twilio is going to show you how to use existing call centers, how to scale out into the cloud. So that's why I'm excited about this presentation, and I want to introduce Karla and Patrick to you and kind of take it away. So
thank you, Daniel. Let me start sharing our slides. And I think we are ready to go there. So yes, just as Daniel mentioned, we will be talking about how to augment, adapt, and accelerate your cloud contact center. Or maybe some of you are helping businesses that have an on-premise contact center solution and they are looking for ways to actually modernize it. And that's all what we will be discussing today. But first of all, we will introduce ourselves. Patrick, if you want to start, and then you give it back to me. Just to introduce yourself.
Sorry about that. I had to find the way to unmute. My name is Patrick Kolencherry. I'm a product marketing manager here at Twilio. I've been involved with Flex since day -1. I was one of the folks who wrote the original business plan. Before I actually joined Twilio, I was a Twilio customer. I was the CTO of a company that created a WebRTC platform for wearables. Back then, really strange idea. Now, makes a ton of sense. I kind of wish I'd founded that startup today rather than a few years back. So that's just me.
Thank you, Patrick. And well, my name is Karla Nussbaumer. I lead the technical marketing for Flex. Also, I have been working at Twilio for 1.5 years, but practically all my experience is in unified communications and contact centers, since the legacy on-premise systems to the cloud contact centers or unified communication solutions in the cloud. And now I'm super excited because I'm now working on this programmable contact center that it's Twilio Flex, and we will be discussing why we are super excited about this. So this is basically the agenda that we will review today. We want to talk a little bit about what Daniel was saying about all the situation with COVID, how that is affecting organizations today, and it's our new reality. So that's why we want to discuss about that. What are the challenges that contact centers are facing today? And the ones that they have been chasing all this time with contact centers, what's the problematic? And I'm pretty sure that some of you will find this information useful, and maybe you will also realize, yes, that's something that is happening to us. Well, we are going also to explain you how you can solve some of those challenges, especially with this augmentation approach. When we talk about augmentation, we don't want people to think that it's just like, oh, rip and replace and get another solution. That's not what we want to tell you today. We want to show you ways to upgrade or to just augment solutions without investing a lot of money. And well, finally, that it's super important, we want to show you how to put that into practice, and we will show you how to do that with an IVR and SIP refer and connecting to other systems. Okay, so let's go for that. And well, as Daniel was saying, business not as usual. These are certainly extraordinary times, both personally and professionally, with this reality of the social distance, the shelter in place, and the realities that businesses worldwide have had to adapt to this new climate. And just to tell you something, I have seen everything happening with all the businesses that are here local to the place where I live. Some restaurants and groceries now are selling masks, and that they were not doing that. They are forcing you, of course, to use the mask while you get in. And other ones are just changing their complete operation by adding an increase on curbside pickups for whatever you need. So this means that actually businesses have had to shift quickly in order to stay relevant and to continue to service their own customers. And that's exactly what we want to talk about. What these businesses have to do to embrace the change. So look at this headline that I have in this slide. I'm going to pause just to give you a chance to read it. So headlines such as the one that I'm showing here, they reveal that contact centers are really strained right now, and more specifically that they are having trouble to adjust to the new reality of working from home. These contact centers are looking for ways to shift the operation so that they can move their agents to a remote model. But it's not only on the technical side, but also on the cultural aspect. So they are struggling with all of these. And they are wondering how they can keep up with the increase in the volume of interactions and also in the expanded handle times. They are trying to find a solution that can scale quickly, whether that means adding new agents, maybe expanding geographically or to other territories or new regions or states, or even just handling different interactions across multiple channels, maybe not just voice, but how can they scale that to digital channels? And this is basically what we are seeing. So let's expand on some of these challenges that the contact centers are facing and how they can try to address some of these points. So in this slide, you are seeing the top 3 customer experience challenges that we see in most of the customers. We are talking every day too. So we have seen these customer experience leaders that they realize how important it is to adapt to the new reality, and especially because the consumer needs are changing every day, their expectations and the way they work. So they are also influencing how the contact centers need to adapt. And based on that, these customer experience leaders, we have studied that one of our analysts surveyed over 700 specialists in the contact centers, that the ones that are managing the contact centers. And the survey said that most of them struggle with these 3 pain points, like the inflexible systems, limited integrations, and limited security. But let me tell you what I mean when I said inflexible systems. This is basically those solutions, or in this case, contact centers, that prohibit the progress. So let's say that you are working on a contact center today, or you want to help a business that has a contact center. So some of you may experience that contact center does not allow you to add new channels. Let's just talk about WhatsApp. And maybe some of them, the technology is restricting the business to integrate these new channels. And it's not only the channels, maybe it could be the limited integrations that I'm talking about. And when I said limited integrations, there are also certain contact centers that they force customers to only use 1 integration or 2. So maybe they can only add Salesforce, and that's it. But they cannot add their ERP system, payment systems, or maybe an in-house knowledge base. So this actually creates a huge problem, not only for the technical side, because then the technical team has to look for ways to integrate that. And if they cannot integrate, they need to find a way that they provide access to those tools to the agents and the users of the contact center outside of the contact center. So now you may be thinking, well, they are creating siloed solutions. And yes, that's exactly one of the main problems, siloed systems and solutions. And the other one is the limited security. So when we talk about security, we are thinking about all the different layers that users may experience when they are using a technology. And this could be the encryption, so using SRTP or TLS to encrypt not only the voice and the media, but also the signaling. Another one will be when your agents, supervisors, or the technical users want to log into the contact center applications. They need to be authenticated. And I will consider a third one. There are a lot of security layers, but I will consider a third one that it's basically have a secure integration between your contact center and your business applications. Like, let's say, Active Directory, or maybe you want to integrate a CRM, right? So as these challenges can seem prohibited to innovate, this is why we want to share with you why it's important to have an augmentation approach. And when we think about this augmentation approach, it's extremely important and highly effective because you can power your existing contact center to deliver more. And we'll look at this in 3 different phases. You can modernize the existing infrastructure without a rip and replace that I explained before. You can also improve the service that you are delivering just by adding new service at your own pace. And maybe those services, you start adding them on the cloud. And the other one is that you can extend your resources while reducing the complexity of unnecessary upgrades. When I talk about upgrades, this is extremely important because maybe some of you have faced this situation when you have a contact center with a lot of different applications, and sometimes you want to integrate a new solution. Let's say that you want to integrate a new IVR to deliver callback services or survey or maybe something else. The problem is that if you want to add this new service, sometimes you have to go and review all the infrastructure that you have, and sometimes it's not a simple upgrade of an existing application. Sometimes you have to go and upgrade a lot of other services so that all of them are compatible. So what in a moment you thought it could be a very simple project then ends up being a complete, a huge project that now it could get out of control. So, well, that's why we think about this augmentation, right? And there are several ways to augment a contact center, but today PK and I want to talk about these 3 main use cases, and we will explain 2 of these during the how to put this in practice. The first one is the self-service automation. And when I talk about self-service, some of you know this as the IVR, but I want to call it self-service. Why? Because today IVR is just related to voice, but the reality is that now self-service allow you to do more things than just the voice or the phone call. You can expand it to different digital channels. So I will talk about that. We will also discuss a little bit how organizations can add new channels to your contact center without affecting the performance, and also how to leverage the SIP connectivity. SIP connectivity to integrate different applications, maybe connect to different contact centers or a contact center to an IP telephony system, or maybe even bring in the carrier that you are using today. So let's dive into these case stories, and I will show you how you can augment them using specific use cases. First of all, I want to start with the self-service solution. And here I want you to think why organizations or customers may need to modernize an IVR. Let's say they only have IVR for voice-related services. So why do you think they will need to modernize this IVR? First of all, it could be because the system is already end of support and it requires an expensive upgrade and maybe a high learning curve, or maybe because the system is not user-friendly and it does not provide a designer tool where you can make moves and changes like drag and drop easily. Or you're not going to allow me to lie. A lot of the IVRs that we know are static IVRs. That means that they don't change based on the user input. And let me just give you an example. An static IVR is, for instance, I start calling a business and it says, hey, press 1 for sales, press 2 for support. press 3 if you know the extension. So things like that. So what happens that then I have to listen to all the menu, and sometimes if the menu is long, it could be super frustrating because I already know what I want to do. I either just want to listen to my balance and the option is not exactly there, or maybe I just want to make a payment over the phone. So that's the static IVR, the one that doesn't change based on what us, the consumers, we need. Or well, in other cases, IVRs, they don't have the ability to connect to different applications. So that could be the main reasons why you want to change your IVR and modernize it to a self-service solution. So in this diagram, what I'm trying to show you is basically a representation of an on-premise solution with the servers, the gateways, the session border controllers, and the IVR in particular. So imagine that you want to support a customer that has this type of a scenario. The only thing that you need to do is that we will start by, let me start clicking here. We will start by connecting using a SIP interface, and we will show you more about that later, that on-premise system to Twilio Studio. So we were talking about that. Daniel's nephew is using already Twilio Studio that basically provides a very simple visual application builder that helps you create workflows using a drag and drop widgets. So, but let me explain you what are the use cases that you can accomplish with this. So first of all, with the Studio, you can get a conversational IVR or a conversational self-service that goes from generic to a personalized menu. So what is a conversational IVR? Do you remember I told you about the static IVR that I have to listen to all the menu? Okay, the conversational is different. I call right now to the IVR or the self-service solution, and instead of reading or telling me all the different options, the self-service solution will say, how can I help you? And then I will say, I want to make a payment. So I don't have to listen to all the menu. The system automatically understands what I need and it will transfer me to a payment system. It will say, oh, as I understand, you want to make a payment. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, it will transfer me to a payment system. That's a conversational IVR. And I was talking that it could be generic, like that simple example, or it could be personalized. When it's personalized, it offers you a solution based on your particular business needs. So let's say that the system recognizes that this is Karla, and let's just imagine that I'm calling to my bank. So it will know that I have a mortgage, that I have certain credit cards, etc. So the system will say, oh, hey, Karla, good afternoon. We know that you have an open ticket related to your mortgage. Are you calling about that? And I can say yes or no, but that's the type of personalized self-service solution that I was talking about. So those are the type of things that you can do that actually improve the customer experience. Another one could be, as I mentioned before, let's not call it IVR. Let's call it self-service. Why? Because we can provide self-service for more than just the voice. We can offer it to any channel that we support on the Twilio side. That could be WhatsApp, SMS, web chat, or any other applications. And yes, how many times you have seen like you are using your mobile device and you can start chatting with an agent, or before an agent, you can start chatting and interacting with an IVR, or sometimes even with a chatbot. That's the other advantage. You can integrate Autopilot to a Studio. Autopilot is the artificial intelligence platform and chatbot tool that we use at Twilio, and it can help you to automate responses. So examples like the one I was saying, like, hey, provide me my balance, or when do I have to pay the next service? So I don't need an agent. I don't need a human to actually tell me all of this, right? We can automate all those responses. And finally, processing payments. That's another thing that you can do with your self-service. Karla can call, say that I want to pay my credit card, and the system will transfer me to that self-service menu that is going to process my payment in a secure way. We use PCI for this type of solutions. And I just explained 4 examples on how you can use your self-service. And maybe some of you didn't even know that all of this, we can do that, right, with a self-service. So these are ways where you can help and provide some consultancy to your businesses or organizations that you want to support to see how we can offer them a better experience for their users and the partners and customers that are contacting them. So now, let me pass to the other example. So now I want to talk about how we can add new channels and leverage that experience. So again, I want to stay with the legacy or on-premises scenario that we have here. Let's imagine that in this case, maybe you have a contact center that supports voice and maybe a few channels, let's say web chat and email, that are traditional channels that a contact center support. You can either support those digital channels or maybe it's only voice. And this is where we see a problem. So in this era of the digital environment, there are a lot of new channels that we are seeing. We have WhatsApp, we have Facebook Messenger, we have Twitter, Line. We have a lot of different solutions and ways to communicate with other people. So why the technology and why contact centers do not support all these channels if consumers are using them to establish communication with other people? And that's exactly what we want to explain with this. Again, we can connect and augment that legacy contact center with Twilio Flex. How we do it? Again, with a SIP interface. The only thing we need is that this legacy system supports SIP connectivity. And then we can add Flex. Actually, we have 2 ways at Twilio on how we can do it. In this diagram, I'm showing you how we are connecting with the SIP interface, but we can do it adding just a Twilio programmable messaging for the channel that you want to add. That will take a few days to get it done, or we can add Twilio Flex. With Twilio Flex, you can actually do this in a couple of hours and integrate the channels that you need. And again, it could be any of the channels that are supported by Flex, like I'm talking about the WhatsApp, SMS, web chat, we can add video, but maybe you have other channels, maybe you have email. Well, we have APIs that can allow you to integrate those channels, or even your own web chat, right? It doesn't have to be the web chat that we are using, but some companies, they actually use their own web chat platform. And normally that solution is completely separate to the contact center. Well, with Twilio Flex, you can actually integrate that channel into the platform. So basically with this, what I want you to remember is that Flex provides that flexibility to add different channels, and customers don't have to feel frustrated that they cannot add different solutions to their platform. And there's another example that we discuss about, and this is the SIP connectivity. With SIP connectivity, let's think about if businesses are looking to replace high-cost PRI trunks with SIP trunks. That could be basically one of the alternatives why they will need SIP connectivity. Or maybe they have SIP trunks, but they want to interconnect their existing system to Twilio to augment channels, to augment to an IVR, to add artificial intelligence, or to add any other new applications to modernize their system. And actually, this is another way on how we can provide these services. So we can remove these PRIs and actually add the Twilio SIP trunking just to reduce cost. We also offer the ability to pay as you go, so you only pay for what you consume. And the other advantage is that you can do it globally, any place in the world where you are located or where you are providing services. But it's not only that. Let's say that you want to connect using this zip interface, your legacy solution, to a new Twilio component. In this case, I'm just showing Flex. We also see that there are some organizations that they are super happy working with the carriers that they have today. And maybe they are thinking, well, if I move my solution to the cloud, what will happen with that carrier? I'm super happy with that relationship and I don't want to lose it. Well, we also offer the ability to bring your own carrier and connect that directly to our services. So with these, organizations don't have to remove or cancel existing contracts with partners that they are super happy working with. And not only that, but we also offer these voice insights and debugging tools that can help you to measure and maintain the call quality of all your call experiences. So you know what's happening since the moment you started a call until the moment you connect that to the end user. So a few things and a few scenarios where we can leverage all this zip trunking strategy. And I know that I have been explaining all of these, but the most important part for us is showing you how you can do all of these and how you can put this into practice. So we're going to show you that. And if there are any questions, Daniel, do you want me to make a pause for questions right now? Or maybe we move some questions to the chat?
Maybe at the end, so we have more time to network. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Go ahead.
So then let's go and show you how we can put this into practice. And for that, I will turn it over to Patrick.
Hey there, let me go ahead and share my screen and start jumping into this. Cool. So just for a bit of, I guess, can you see my screen? Hold on a sec.
Yes, we can see it.
It's just waiting for this to load here. Just for some context for everyone, I've done a more in-depth talk about this about 2 years back at Signal 2018. And this is really meant to be kind of a supplement to that talk that updates some of the items that are changed at Twilio since then, with some certain new product features such as the release of ZipRefer. And more importantly, it's focused on just the IVR migration side in terms of how you get media over to Twilio and how you get media and context back to an existing contact center. If you've augmented it with the Twilio IVR, or if you've augmented it by adding in an overflow queue, for instance, with Flex. Really started building this around some of the use cases that we were seeing with COVID-19, especially as people started to really start to get large amounts of phone traffic into their contact centers, which shelter in place and people being at home. So let's kind of start things off with the very, very beginning of this. Let's say that you're a company, Owl Insurance. You have a contact center today, you're working with a set of legacy carriers, you've got an SBC in place, and you've decided you're going to go move your IVR over to Twilio. The very first question and the very first thing that comes up is, how do I get that voice traffic from my existing contact center or my voice infrastructure over to Twilio? And there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. The first way that kind of comes to mind for many folks is, I'm going to go ahead and take that traffic and point it at a Twilio DID and basically make an outbound call from my SBC to Twilio, or in some cases, have my legacy carrier point a toll-free number that I have coming in for a portion of my traffic and point that to Twilio for certain groups of traffic based upon like NPA, etc. That's an okay approach. We generally don't necessarily recommend doing this, mostly because it's kind of a pain to send information back as you collect that information from an IVR, number one. Number two, there's also the added cost of having to go actually pay for that additional call leg when you're making an outbound call to a local number over there. On the bright side, it's pretty easy to set up. It's pretty painless to set up. Again, you're just forwarding that traffic over to a DID there. The big issue really comes into place when you look at the way that the call flow works. In order to go get information back from a Twilio IVR to your existing contact center or your voice infrastructure there, you either have to trombone that call through Twilio, tromboning being a technical term where all the media flows through Twilio throughout the entire lifetime of the call, even if we're not necessarily handling and something that's actually agent-facing on our side. or you have to go send that information out of band, either by using an API, etc., in order to go attach the information that you've collected from that IVR into whatever ACD you're using from a routing perspective. The better approach, and the approach that we recommend, is to use something known as a SIP interface at Twilio. What a SIP interface is really just a provider-to-provider trunk. It's a way to take your existing legacy SVC and point this over to Twilio and push traffic over to that. It's only downside about this is that it's slightly more difficult to set up versus just sending it to a DID. In reality, it's not that much more difficult to do so. Though one thing to be aware of, though, is that you might need to go use a VPN or private connectivity, depending upon whether or not you can terminate to an FQDN. And that's really kind of the downside. But some of you might be thinking, won't this have the exact same problem? How do you avoid that trombone? In the past, that was the case. And so we'd recommend that people would actually port their numbers in order to go shift an IVR over to Twilio, or basically handle that out-of-band communication back. But a few weeks back, we GA'd a product called the refer verb. And what that lets you do is it lets you use SIP refer to drop Twilio out of the media path. And that makes that entire experience a lot cleaner, because then you can go include information that you collected in an IVR within the actual headers of that SIP refer request, either inside an X header or inside the user-to-user header, or the UUI header over there. And I'll get to that in a bit more depth. So how do you actually set up this situation over here, a SIP interface or a SIP domain, to get that over to traffic? Well, I'll walk you through that through a few different slides. I went through and actually configured this myself in order to go send traffic over. And so I'll walk you through that there. So the first step is to go inside Twilio's console. What you see here is Twilio's console, which is really where you configure Twilio's services and change the settings onto this. And what you have to do is create something known as a SIP domain. A SIP domain is basically an endpoint that's reserved that you can send SIP traffic to, and we'll accept that, and we'll go ahead and point that to a Twilio application of your choice. So click the red button to go create a new one. I threw one up over here called Home on the Domain. As a heads up, the SIP URI that you specify when you're setting this up is actually something that has to be unique. It's something that has to be globally unique, so just keep that in mind. Generally, I don't recommend against something like Home on the Domain. I personally tend to use stuff that's more randomly generated, just from that. The next piece into this is that all SIP domains require some way for you to authenticate what you're putting into, what you're actually using with Twilio. And we offer two options from an authentication standpoint. The first way is something known as an IP ACL, where you can limit the traffic that comes into your SIP domain to a specific set of IP addresses. The second is through a credential list. For my own use case, I personally used an IP ACL, mostly because I've got a 29 at home. I've got a range of static IPs at home. And that was kind of the fastest way that I could go throw that up. I literally did set this up using my own IPs. So I kind of blocked this out in terms of what this is. I just added in an IP address range and then created that ACL there. Then the next step from this is really around configuring what happens when a new call comes into the actual platform. But before I go into this, I wanted to call everyone's attention to the secure media section over here. I strongly recommend that everyone use TLS-SRTP. I'm sure everyone's seen the news over the probably last 10, 15 years about people doing SIP interception, et cetera, where they're like sniffing like unencrypted RTP. So just go ahead and secure it. Just enable TLS-SRTP. It makes life a lot easier. If for whatever reason you can't use TLS-SRTP, we do have the ability to set up an IPsec VPN, but there's a few additional steps for that. And that's something that you probably want to reach out to support to help walk you through setting up an IPsec VPN there, just to go encrypt your media and your signaling. The next thing I want to call attention to is basically this call configuration bit over here. And I'll get into a bit more depth about like what this means, but at a really high level, whenever a new call comes into Twilio, into a SIP domain or a phone number, et cetera, you have to tell us what we should do with that and where we should point it to. In this case, and for the purposes of this presentation, I've pointed it to a product called Twilio Studio. But you can point it towards a webhook. You can point it to something known as a TWIML bin, which is really like a static piece of TWIML that lives on Twilio, or a Twilio function. Since this is a serverless meetup, Twilio functions is our serverless environment here at Twilio. It's something that actually wraps Lambda, provides a bunch of different convenience features on top of that, including things like signature validation for Twilio, etc. And we've created a bunch of cool little CLI tools around this to go deploy functions from the command line. But that's one of the endpoints that you can go use here for that. So let's talk a bit about what happens when an actual call comes in at Twilio. I'm assuming that not everyone here has used Twilio in the past, so I'll just give a quick overview and run through of what happens there. When a call comes into Twilio, either to a phone number or a SIP interface, the first thing that we do is we actually send a webhook to your application to ask, what should we do with this call? And that's really how you have call control over Twilio, is your application responds with something known as TWIML. For the folks who are in sort of the telephony industry, TWIML is kind of like our equivalent of voice XML, but it's done completely interactively. And so you respond back with a step or a set of instructions that we then execute. And based upon the information that we execute on that, like if we, for instance, listen for DTMF, we pass that information back to you and ask, what do you want us to do with this next? And that's kind of how you have control over a call. And so you can build things like IVRs, you can build things like conference bridges, like mass calling, etc. The thing about building an IVR, though, is at the end of the day, if you're building a TWIML app from scratch, you end up writing a state machine, because that's inherently what a complex IVR is it's one really giant state machine. And so to just make that easier, we released a product a few years back called Twilio Studio. It lets you pretty much everything that you can do when you're building a TWIML app by hand in terms of writing the code to go return that information back. But it does it in a way that's visual, so you can just drag and drop different blocks that instruct what you do with this call. It's something that can also use an HTTP request in order to go reach out to an endpoint that you might have on your application to go get information as part of a data dip, either in a CRM or some other type of system of record. Or you can use Twilio functions to go do things that are more complex. For instance, if you wanted to go validate like a CNPJ number if you're in Brazil, etc. Now, Studio is cool because you don't actually have to expose the entirety of a call flow inside Studio. You can actually transfer a call from Studio or a messaging interaction into another application that generates TWIML. So for instance, you could use this to basically give someone control over just the IVR portion or a certain portion of your IVR while maintaining control in your own application for the other portion of this. You can use Studio to go transfer something to Flex or to Autopilot or to another number. For the purposes of this, I built a workflow that basically talks about a greeting, it starts a recording, and it sends it to Autopilot, where I do some light NLU to determine what the intent of the caller is. And then from there, either refer it to a legacy contact center using something known as a redirect, or I sent it to Flex in the case of my claims contact center, which at Owl Insurance we've moved into place. Which kind of brings us back to the refer piece. And if you're dealing with Flex, it's pretty straightforward. You send it to Flex, we keep that call. You don't have to worry about us being in the media path because inherently like the contact center runs on us. And so we should be in the media path. The real challenge comes when you want to go refer it back to a contact center and drop us out of there because we're not really relevant there. And that's really where SIP refer comes into place. So this is kind of what it looks like in terms of sending a refer back. At the end of that flow, what I did was I pointed it at a piece of TWIML that basically returned a refer response to a specific SIP endpoint over here. I included some information that's related to the context as part of that SIP URI. So if you look at that SIP URI, I wanted to call out three things. The first one being the green over here. That's the original number that I received in this. That's something that I just included from an address perspective. The second portion is actually in the query string parameters. The way that we recommend people send context back to an existing system is to either use X headers or what's known as the UUI header. And you can specify those headers as query string parameters. As long as they're URL encoded, we'll take those and we'll actually turn those into headers into the actual response. Here's what one of these looks like. I pulled up in Wireshark. and captured this when I was actually doing a refer back, and included information about like what the actual queue was inside the UUI header, and then also included just a random more magic thing because I don't know, the world needs more magic. So that's kind of the how-to in terms of when you send that context back. Now, a few things to keep in mind about SIP-refer. Number one, you can only do X headers in UUI header and the UUI header if you're passing information back. For most people, this isn't really a problem, but I know that I've run into customers who stuff information to the diversion header or a couple of other headers like that. I've seen some people abuse p-asserted identity to go pass information back to a contact center. I recommend against that. But you can only use X headers and the UUI header if you're passing information back. The next thing is, if you're referring from Twilio, that's publicly available, and it's GA today. So that lets you basically take a call that's coming into Twilio and refer it back so that we drop out of the media path. However, if you want to send a SIP-refer to us, that's something that's currently in a private beta and will be in a public beta soon. Next piece into this is around parameter pairs. That's a great way to go cram a ton of information into a single header field. We do support those as part of the query string parameters. They just have to be URL encoded. And we'll attach those to either the X headers or the UI. So you can use that to include a bunch of key value pairs, for instance, if you're collecting a bunch of really complex pieces of information as part of an IVR flow. Next thing is that there's not a Studio widget for this. So you do have to use something that's known as a redirect widget. And all that does is you point it to either a static piece of TWIML or an application that returns this information that I dropped over here, which is basically really, really simple XML document that outlines who should we send that refer to and what those headers should look like. And you can pull that header information from query string parameters that you use when you specify that URI. And then the last piece is you can't really use refer for doing a warm transfer from Flex to another contact center. It's something that works great for cold transfers, but there's some orchestration logic you have to do in order to go maintain those conferences if you're going to be doing that as part of a warm transfer. I know this went into a ton of really, really deep depth here, but I'll post a link to another presentation that provides a bit more of an introduction into this that you can basically use with this as a supplement here. And I will also be releasing some sample code pretty soon in a GitHub repo. So that's kind of my overview here of how to sort of actually implement this in practice in terms of implementing a SIP interface and then using SIP-refer to go transfer from an IVR over to an existing contact center and maintaining context as part of headers.
Wow.
So
that is awesome. Thank you so much. It's a virtual applause. Thank you so much. So do we have any questions from the audience? Is this a good moment or you want to add something, Karla?
I think this is a good moment to ask some questions. So we have a few customer scenarios, but I think that I will let people ask questions, and that's all what we presented. It's basically we're just looking for ways. Think about Lego pieces, right? We are thinking about ways to transform the customer experience just by putting together these little Legos. So you guys don't have to do everything in one shot.
And don't let this presentation spook you. Like, you can always watch this. It's being recorded. Okay, we have a link here as well. So it's easy. Like, if my nephew is making IVRs, you can do that as well. And so any questions now? Okay, we have Steve. Yeah.
Just really quickly, I don't have a question, again, because I'm not in the industry, but I just wanted to thank you both for coming by. That was definitely a cool presentation, and I learned a lot, so thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
And then also, like, while we are waiting for questions and talk about use cases, I posted a link to the form as well. I was supposed to show you the form at the beginning so they can pace themselves about the content, what interests you, but at least you're going to be able to get the free Manning book that we give at every meetup. And I'll make sure to include Karla and Patrick as well into the book draw.
Sure.
So until people get courage to ask questions, maybe you can. Oh, we have somebody talking.
Yeah, maybe a quick question. Does Twilio support having hard phone, like a Polycom hard phone, to be connected and have delivery directly to that, a bit like a cloud PBX?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. We do support that. There's actually, unfortunately, I didn't have that in the screenshot, but if you set up a SIP domain at Twilio, you can set up SIP registration on those SIP domains and register endpoints directly to Twilio. That's actually how I do a lot of my tests from a SIP standpoint. Is either by connecting Asterisk or an endpoint, like a soft client to it, and then capturing data there.
And I think it's a very important question because that's what happens with a lot of the contact centers. They actually say, hey, I have paid a lot of money for all these phones. And if you think about it, the phones are at least $150. So it could be more expensive. Other ones are even $400, but they want to protect their investment. So yes, with Twilio, you can either use like the soft client that we have, or we can pass all the calls directly to the SIP phones.
Yeah, thank you. And it's because in some cases, like it's a company with mostly a contact center, but that have few needs for physical phone, either a conference phone or something else, where it's mostly cell phone but needs some hard phone. So it's good to have that kind of larger scope of offering.
Thank you. Hi, Patrick. This is Ziad. That's actually great. Hi, Daniel. Good to see you. Good to see everyone. This is actually great. It's what you said is very interesting, and I would definitely love to have a separate discussion with you moving forward, because so the company that I work in actually does call centers, and I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. We actually want to move. Okay, let me take a step back. We have different challenges, right? And if you've worked with call centers, sometimes we have to use dialers, depending on the client that we're working with. If we're doing campaigns, sometimes we have to use dialers. But then we also need a phone system, and we have Avaya right now, and we're trying to get off this and go into a cloud-based solution, because we're opening branches in different parts of the globe. Right, so ideally, I would want something that is cloud-based, available regardless of your geography, and of course, more important than everything else, cost-effective, because the reality is in call center is an industry that does not have huge margins, so everything has to be very cost-effective. Yeah, money is important, but it seems to be a little bit more in this industry. So I would love to have a discussion with you around that. Right, I can tell you a little bit more about what we have, the challenges, and we'll see how we can use this moving forward.
So this is not supposed to be sales calls, but thank you for being interesting.
I know it's not no, Daniel. This is the beauty of these events. It's not a sales call. It's a call. It's an introduction to technology. But what he's talking about is something that I'm actually looking for.
And you are in luck. Karla spent like almost 9 years at Avaya. She knows it inside out.
Yes,
I some of the questions now.
So
yes,
we
perfect.
can talk about that.
Yes, we can definitely let's take this offline. Would love to have a discussion, understand a little bit more about your offering. My apologies, I came late to the meeting, so I messed up the first part. So I'd like to know more, and maybe I can arrange for you to come and present.
Are you in Toronto? Where's your location?
It's in Mississauga. It's going to be virtual, Daniel. Like everything else that's going on.
I didn't leave my basement in 4 months.
Same here. I've been to the office in the last 4 months, maybe 5 times. Right?
Hey.
So same thing.
I mean, technically, you did leave the basement in order to go put in your wood floors.
Thank you for that lecture. Yeah, from you, for Patrick, that as well.
Yeah. So again, let's connect Patrick and Karla, and we'll see how to move this forward. But thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll be providing recording shortly, so you'll be able to catch up as well. Any other questions? Any other interests from there?
And just to mention something before anybody else asks another question, if you would like to play with the solution that PK and I was talking about, or Patrick and I just call him PK. We have Twilio Flex trial, so you can actually go play with that, and it's very interesting. Like before I joined Twilio, actually for my interview, I went to check the Twilio Flex. I downloaded, I started running it, and I practically set up my contact center in 30 minutes, and I had my voice and web chat running. So it's very easy, it's very simple. Of course, if you want to do other things, you will need to add code, but yeah, you can just go and start playing with it.
And to echo what Karla said, if you set up a Twilio account, and if you actually just email me your account SID, it's available inside console, it starts with an AC. I can actually go ahead and upgrade your account and throw some credits onto there.
Nice.
Throw like $50 of credits onto there and get that done. So if you I'll drop my email into here, and if you create a Twilio account, just again shoot me a message and I can go add some credits onto that. And we let you use Flex for 5,000 hours for free.
Wow.
Which is
wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be my email. I'm happy to drop my email, but it's not going to be my email that's going to be playing. It's someone like one of the analysts who's going to set up this. So again, I'll take. But this is great, perfect. Thank you very much. That would be actually
just
setup as well, or you can reach them through LinkedIn. I will be providing.
No, I'll put my email here. Sure, by all means, I'll put my email.
Yeah, as long as y'all mentioned that you were at the serverless meetup, I can. That's all I need to know. It's just that. And
just drop me a line. Exactly, drop me a line. I'm not gonna create accounts or anything. Just drop me a line, and then we'll take the discussion offline.
Thank you, Ziad. Any other questions? Guys,
well, if I may jump into a second question. And first of all, I like the fact that it's virtual. I'm based in Montreal, so when I saw the advertisement on LinkedIn, I was like, hey, let's jump on that. I started exploring that some time ago, did some few stuff on it. But if someone wants to use that a little bit more like a UC, even if the application is built more as a contact center, but there's a contact center. There's also people that want to have like a mobile client to take their call and do some of that stuff. Okay, you can support hard phone, but is there a plan, or do you have something like mobile client that is already kind of pre-built? Because building everything ourselves, well, I come from more the telco side, so deploying Avaya stuff and those kind of stuff where you have to customize, but not necessarily build from scratch. There's a great value of being able to go under the hood and customize, but do you have something kind of ready to use?
So I don't know if you're talking to this or specific products. When I was playing with SIP, I just set up this Lean phone, so which is actually like second soft phone on my app.
Yeah.
It's WhatsApp or like it's an extra phone, but maybe you can fill in.
Yeah. I think from a UC perspective, if you're looking at something that's just like a pure UC replacement, like for instance, it's replacing 8x8, etc. We do have a couple of partners who've built something a lot more robust on top of Twilio that uses Twilio under the hood, but provides a mobile application and everything that's sort of ready to go for more of a UC use case there. While you can use Flex for a UC type use case, it's like using like a jackhammer to go knock in like a pin nail into your floor. Bringing it back to you replacing your flooring, Daniel. But I'd recommend going with one of our partners in that case for like more of that UC type use case.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Any other questions before I start asking them?
Patrick, since we're talking about UC, do you guys work with Teams? Do you integrate with Teams?
So Teams you can use an SBC to basically provide a SIP connection to Teams.
Yeah.
You can basically set that up and then treat Twilio as like a provider-to-provider trunk to go do a transfer to Teams that way. Alternatively, if you're just looking for connectivity for Teams, you can go connect to Twilio Elasticsearch trunk directly to Teams.
Okay. Thank you.
So I just pasted the link to the form again. We only have 3 people that registered. That means like you have really good chance of winning that Manning book. So make it harder, whoever put their name.
I have a quick question. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering, can you integrate Twilio with progressive web apps?
So PWAs, as in like using Twilio client inside a PWA that runs on iOS or on Android, right? Yes, but I mean, I'm gonna caveat this with, I'm sure you're familiar with the restrictions that Apple puts on PWAs that basically run on your home screen in terms of like scope, etc. But you can run like Twilio client, etc. inside Safari, inside Android's Chrome, basically any browser that supports WebRTC. Where it won't work is if you're using a PWA inside an embedded web view on iOS, like those don't have access to the WebRTC APIs, so you won't be able to go use it from like a voice perspective there. Other thing to kind of be aware of, like from a PWA standpoint, is just state management. I know that that's a lot messier on iOS than it is on Android, because iOS does not treat PWAs as like primary applications, but that's a rant that I don't want to get into.
Right, thanks a lot.
Anybody else? So maybe I can ask a broader question. The reason I didn't want to get involved in this myself is our use cases are limited. I only seen this IVR at the bank that frustrated me. I only have friends that have problems accepting mobile payments or credit cards to do it touchless. But you've seen so many use cases, and thank you for identifying the core points. But can you go more specifically in sharing some of these stories, what you've seen, so that people see on the blog posts in the news?
Yeah, well, let me talk about a few use cases here, covering different scenarios. So let me just talk about, well, you were talking about Twilio.org. Let me just go for that too. So we have, for instance, now with all this COVID situation, we had from existing companies that they have to adapt to this situation. So for instance, we have United Way. United Way, they provide 211 services in US, but they had a problem that they were using an existing solution, a legacy solution that some of you have. And the problem was that in one moment they said, well, I cannot move my agents to home, so how can I start enabling them? And the other problem that they have is that there were certain counties in the state of Ohio that didn't have coverage to the 211 services. So people started calling other counties, other states, and they were receiving a high volume of calls. So I can tell you that the volume of calls increased up to 300% of what they were receiving before COVID. And it was very frustrating for the few agents that were working at home, and that and they had to provide all these services for other counties. So that was the main problem for United Way. So they started a POC with Flex, actually, and in less than a week, they actually deployed services for 37, to cover services in 37 counties in Ohio, and they actually implemented Flex, but they also implemented a Studio and Autopilot. A Studio was the workflow solution, and for them it was very important to provide chatbots and automate responses. So with the alternative to reduce that 300% of increment in the calls, they wanted to actually maybe get like 50% of those calls get answered by that self-service solution and the chatbot. So they actually did that. That was an example covering like Twilio Flex or covering Autopilot. We have other stories. For instance, let me talk about an existing customer. We have Shopify, that most of you know them, and they were already using Flex. Most, or actually 95% of their agents were already working from home, so they didn't have that problem of the remote agents. But when the COVID situation started, it was mandatory that everybody had to work there. So what they did was actually to augment the solution by offering other type of alternatives, like they actually built a connectivity dashboard to measure the internet of the agents. So then the IT team was able to receive notifications and alerts when agent 1 or agent 2 were having problems with the system, and also the agents, problems with the internet, and also the agents were receiving a screen pop that said, your your internet is degraded. It's going down, it's not enough for the voice, so you will have problems with voice. This is the moment where you should tell your customer that maybe you can shift that conversation to a digital channel. So maybe start chatting or just with SMS. So a few examples on how they decided with an existing Flex solution, in that case, they continue augmenting to provide a different service.
Nice.
There's another one that I'll bring up is related to contact tracing. How many folks here are familiar with contact tracing? I guess should I give a quick overview of contact tracing?
Yeah, do that.
Cool. Yeah, so side note, I am super passionate about contact tracing because I've spent like the last 2 months like just diving really deep into this. That's part of the reason why like I'm going gray. But at a really high level, if you're looking to go reopen an area after a pandemic has swept through that, one of the things that's super, super important to know is understanding how the disease is spreading and where it's spreading, in order to go identify things like hotspots and clusters where people might be congregating or where there might be spread, to really understand like what's the virality factor of what's going on, who's passing to whom, and the demographics of who's affected. And so contact tracing is basically the process in which after someone gets a positive test result for a disease, a public health authority gets notified of that result, and then they call them and they talk to them, and they have an interview that lasts between 30 to 60 minutes, where they dig into like, what have you done over the last few weeks? Who have you gotten in touch with? Where have you been? And they log all of that information. They reach out to those people in places where they've been to let them know, hey, someone who was positive for the disease was here. You might have been exposed to this. And at a really high level, what this is just one really big contact center. Either one big contact center or a big like surveying platform where you're using a bot, for instance, to collect that information from people. And so over the last few months, this has been like a huge hot topic kind of like globally. And that's actually a place where we've been working with a lot of state governments and local governments, and actually some national governments, in order to go implement a contact tracing program where Flex powers, their contact center, where they're using SMS and tools like RedCap in order to go do automated surveys, to go do symptom tracking, or where, for instance, the government of Ireland is using us from an SMS standpoint to go handle verifications to make sure that it's real people providing data, rather than people just like spamming data by downloading the app to like a bot farm. And so that's something that we're seeing a ton of here. And actually, I guess somewhat related to that, one of my friends put together is part of this group called Coders Against COVID. And they put together something called Find COVID Testing. And they've been finding some really interesting like stats about this. Like, number one, I didn't realize this, but you actually reach a larger part of the population if you offer them the ability to go search for things like testing over SMS. Because there's a surprisingly large number of people who straight up just don't use websites as much as you'd think for finding that type of information. Especially people in certain rural areas, or in certain rural areas. And so my friends found that, they're able to go like actually reach out to and work with a much wider set of patients than they'd normally be able to if they're using just a website. The other really interesting thing that they're working on now is doing work about predicting whether or not a place will be a hotspot for things like COVID based upon traffic and requests to find information about testing in a certain area. And they've actually found that with a limited sample set, they're working on expanding this. They found that they're able to go like effectively anticipate that an area is going to be a hotspot like a few days before like those results actually come in, just based upon looking at information as to like who's searching for what and where are they searching, like what areas are they searching, and just logging those queries and just mapping it out. Like it sounds crazy, and I think for us in tech, like we tend to go take it for granted that this is like really simple and straightforward. Like, oh yeah, of course. you just log that into a database and then like just run an aggregation on it, a geo aggregation on it. But a lot of the stuff is considered like really kind of cutting edge from a public health perspective, which just sort of blew my mind. But yeah.
Amazing. What was the website for these coders for COVID? Maybe you can paint
Coders Against COVID? I'll go ahead and drop a link.
Okay, yeah. This is cool.
I share also an example here on the chat about what Patrick was talking about.
Karla, you mentioned one point. So we have more people coming in. These guys are late, but they are lucky to get your name. So you mentioned the autopilot. We try to keep this demo simple, but that's another technology that can speed up access to the right agent, because you don't have to listen to all these 5 or more options on the phone. So maybe you can tell them a word or two about autopilot, so just to make it more entertaining. Unless somebody has a question now. We have more people here. Is there a question from the audience, or I can go on probing them? Nope.
Sorry, are we referring to Microsoft Autopilot, or this is a different?
No, Twilio product. So I don't know if you heard about Alexa and this. You heard about Alexa and Google Home Assistant. So imagine that behind the phone. So Twilio has that. They were actually the first company to realize the power of these devices behind the phone. It's a little bit harder based on the quality of the voice on the phone lines to identify it, but it's the same chatbot. So rather than going through the options, you just tell it, support, I want to talk to sales. And it doesn't have to be simple word. It can be full sentence like you would talk to Google Assistant on Alexa. So maybe you can...
That would be actually very impressive. And by the way, great work on the autopilot, PK. That's actually very impressive. The work on autopilot is, sorry, I keep saying autopilot. The work on contact tracing. Right, and it's actually interesting because only in a crisis like that we get to discover the importance of this.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really interesting about contact tracing that just sort of blew my mind is for those folks who are in the contact center world, we all know about like the emotional load that an agent has in a contact center. Like especially if you're in a support-focused contact center, like you have customers who might be yelling at you, who might be screaming at you, or customers who are angry at you, and you might not necessarily feel like empowered to do that. Contact tracing is like that, but worse, because you've got people who are sick, who are scared, who are who are in situations where they're facing like, hey, I've got an illness that's serious, and I might have gotten it in a way that I might not want to admit how I got it, like by doing something that I wasn't supposed to do. For instance, like attending a party or throwing a barbecue or going to a bar. And so, like, I have a ton of empathy for those agents who are on the front lines having to do this in terms of just collecting this information from, as part of contact tracing, because it's not easy. It's not an easy job, and it does take quite a bit of skill and empathy to just probe that out and get people comfortable just talking about, where they've been, who they've seen, who are they friends with, like, yeah.
Besides, it's the emotional problem, because also some people, they don't want to say, hey, I was in a party with all these people, because we are supposed to have a social distance. So you face the other situation, like the people that feel blamed that they were in this situation where they spread the virus, or the other ones that they said, oh, but I haven't been in contact with anybody. How could I be exposed to that, right? And then add that to the poor agents that are trying to keep up with all these calls that sometimes are 24/7. So it has been impressive. And I think that, just to mention something, all of us here should be very patient with agents, and also with all this contact tracing. I don't know if you have seen these announcements, like say, hey, if your ex calls you, don't answer, but if it's the state, answer the phone. I mean, it's a joke, but it's important. You need to answer to those phone calls. And I have to confess, on my side, I normally don't answer calls if I don't know the number. But at this time, I'm trying to do it, because maybe it's the way to protect ourselves and help other people.
And that's something that we actually spent some time working with the carriers and like OEMs on, is around something called rented calls. Like, I've spoken to a number of states and governments who are doing contact tracing, and one of the frustrations is if people see just like a random number and they don't necessarily associate that with being a government entity, people aren't going to pick this up. especially, and here's the crazy thing, especially if it's a local number. And doubly so if you're unlucky enough that the NPA-NXX matches your NPA-NXX. Because people just assume that that's a spoofed call, that's a robocall. And so that's something that we've worked with them to do, is basically we've rolled something out called verified calls, which provides information both like either in a CNAM or if you're using certain dialer applications within there, like an actual rich profile that shows who's calling. And that's helped quite a bit in terms of just getting response rates there from people who are, like in the case of people who are doing contact tracing. So for instance, if you receive a call from the city of New York, you'll actually be able to go see like something on your dialer, like we place a CNAM there to go state that it's New York who's calling you. So
that's cool. Yeah, I saw that the last signal announcement of that product. That's a cool thing you can use. But what I like to add, like you use the word empathy, that's important. So going back to my introductory slides, that's something company has. Like it's different from most of the companies I worked for. And I'm digital nomad, consultant, 30 years, moving around North America and helping businesses. And people say fish things from the head. So far, I haven't noticed that from Twilio. And that's why you're the good position to help us help the world. So, anything else you want to add about autopilot? Something?
Oh, let me talk a little bit about autopilot. Yes, Daniel. So the Twilio autopilot, not the Microsoft one. What we do with that, it's an artificial intelligence chatbot tool. So the reason why I love autopilot is that it's easy to use. So you can define what are the type of flows that you want to run and that you want to automate. And let me first of all, I want to tell you that for all the situation, the crisis that we are living, we created this autopilot solution to help a lot of organizations like states, like PK was talking about, hospitals, or people that are healthcare organizations that are taking care of patients. So we created this autopilot solution to actually provide information on what to do, what are the symptoms, next steps, who they should contact, what they should do to prevent spreading the virus to their family if they have it. So we have all of that. And that has helped a lot of businesses to actually just automate their responses without passing that to the agents. So that's something that we create. But let me go 3 steps behind and explain a little bit what autopilot is. Let's think about first your self-service. Like you in a self-service solution or an IVR, you can also automate certain answers, but you actually know that you are talking to a machine because the answer is very clear. You give one input and it gives you an answer. That's it. But you are not talking, you are not interacting. So with autopilot or with this artificial intelligence, you actually are talking with a machine, but you establish a certain conversation. And of course, artificial intelligence is going to continue evolving in the coming years, right? From all the different vendors. But right now, it can handle processes like, let's say that I want to order my groceries and I want to order them online. So I can order them online, but imagine that I have an issue and I see that in the local store here in Santa Clara, I cannot find it and I need to get Clorox or something from another store. So I can actually start interacting with that tool, either using a phone call or maybe chat or web chat or even WhatsApp if the company allows you to do that. I mean, we support it with autopilot. So I can start chatting and interacting with them. And I said, hey, I have a problem. I need to add Clorox to my order. I don't see it available. And maybe they say, hey, we find it in another city. It's going to take 1 more day. Do you want to wait on your other order to get everything in just one package? Or do you prefer us to send you the first order and then when the other one is ready, we can send it to you? So all of that are things that I can be interacting with the autopilot. Or maybe I said, hey, send me the first order and in which zip code is the Clorox solution that I need. So they can tell me, oh, it's in this zip code. And maybe I said, do you have curbside pickup? And they say, yes. Oh, I can actually, just by interacting with the system, tell them that I will just go and pick that up because maybe I need it urgently. So examples like this. And the reality is that as it's artificial intelligence, you also need to train the machine. That's the most important part. So don't think that it's going to work in the first time you test it. So that's why we call it artificial intelligence.
But there is a good part. There is a good point of training, because you were talking during the presentation how IVR is obsolete over the time. These things becomes better over the time. So more utterances it gets, the better it is. Another thing, like I'm not giving the plug for Autopilot, but what I liked, it's one of the rare providers who learns from multiple channels, because if you have Alexa, it can learn from the Alexa channel, or if you have Lex in Amazon, it learns from the voice and from the text. You can learn from any input that you serve, from the telephone, from the chat, from the SMS, and enrich the responses. So that's another thing. And I just remembered, like, actually, for those who are interested into this, talking to the computers, not just doing the IVRs themselves. At serverlesstoronto.org, we had 2 topics covered similarly. First one was a broader that goes into voice-first design. I did a presentation. It was Alexa-driven, but the principles are the same. So I think it's a second part of the presentation. You can go to slideshare.serverlesstoronto.org and find all the slide decks we had. And then also last year, we had Phil Nash, your colleague from Twilio. When he was doing conference in Toronto, he gave us overview Autopilot. So for those interested to go beyond the IVR, they can watch his presentation. It's a barista demo that everybody does. So the source code is somewhere in the blog that he posted afterwards when it went GA. So that's about this. We have some latecomers to the meetup. Like, guys, do you have any questions? What are you interested in? What brings you? Like, we are recording this. So if you don't want to talk, it's okay. We did intros at the beginning, but I see Leonard, JP, Rajesh, and anybody else wants to talk. We're just chit-chatting here next couple minutes until we do the draw.
Quick question again. Daniel, you mentioned Amazon Lex. So what's the difference between, or is there any difference between Autopilot and Amazon Lex from the backend engine? Because it looked like both of them only speak English at this time.
Yeah.
You can answer that.
Yeah, so there's a difference. We actually built Autopilot completely in-house. So it's our own NLU framework. It's our own intent entity extraction framework that we built in-house. So that's entirely built by us. And so it is a separate engine, and it's a different engine than what Lex uses. So.
But how about languages? Like, I noticed that Alexa does speak many languages, and Amazon is using that to confuse the market. When you want to use Lex, it's all English, not even Spanish. So we have French here. Like, when are you planning to support for French or Spanish, at least for this continent?
Yeah, I don't know when we're adding support for French or Spanish to Autopilot. That's something that I have to go check with the Autopilot team over there.
Because that's
preventing adoption, really. That's going to be.
So you need Spanish in States, and we need French here. So that would really help penetrate the market, not just be chit-chat at the end.
Yeah,
for us.
We spoke about COVID, and anything like government need to be bilingual across Canada.
Yeah,
that's
TLC. It's pretty up there in terms of feature requests for Autopilot. Is language support for French, Spanish, and Brazilian Portuguese. That's where we see a lot of interest in terms of like a language request.
Or now that your stock has grown, you can just buy the company with NLU from Europe for multiple languages. I'll give you a few names. You can buy NLU, natural language understanding. So we are talking AI, but it's really a sub-segment of AI, natural language processing, that needs to understand and extract the utterances.
Honestly, the way that the world is going, I feel like OpenAI is just going to go like eat everyone's lunch. Like GPT-3 is really, really impressive. So
I don't know about Dialogflow. Does it support multiple languages, or they're also English only? I never looked at that.
Dialogflow, I do believe, does support multiple languages.
Okay.
As a heads up, for people who do need support for languages other than English, we do recommend using Dialogflow. we released a product called Media Streams last year, and one of the Streams connectors is for Dialogflow. So basically, you can go receive like that audio in real time from us as a WebSocket, like in a WebSocket connection, and you can basically stream that to Dialogflow and then use that. And with bidirectional streams, you can effectively use Dialogflow or any other bot framework of your choice to basically do the entire interaction on its own and then pass it back to like a Twilio, like a human agent using Flex, etc. Mm-hmm. And our stance has really been, we're kind of the Switzerland from a platform perspective. We're pretty neutral from like an entity standpoint. Mm-hmm. We want to make it easy for our customers to go use whatever tools those are. For instance, there's a really large apparel brand that I've worked with that's built their own entire like recommendation stack and also like product and also suggested answer stack themselves. It's all done 100% in-house, and we just wanted to make sure that we're able to go stream them the audio data that they need, as well as like any of the chat or text data that they need in order to go use that, like use their own services they've built. So.
That's a good point. Actually, like when we announced this talk, like when we talk about the cloud, like people think, oh, we don't need another cloud. We already had whatever, Azure, GCP, Amazon, but Twilio is really living in Amazon cloud. Most of the things that I know, but you're from the inside. And at one point, I think you were using transcription services from Google itself. So it's really like full-blown cloud by the main providers. You're not moving anybody into your own cloud. You just the rep on top. Even the functions that you have are probably implementation on top Amazon Serverless Lambda. So for those who are on the edge saying, oh, we need to go, why would you have two clouds? Let's go to Amazon. That's not an argument. They already cloud just a simple API. And also, like, I don't know, like we have people who did not introduce themselves. I have some friends who are really SIP trunking providers. They are those guys in your slide that you plug into different things. So they partner with Genesis because they can bring in the SIP lines there. They can partner with you as well, but Amazon doesn't allow that. You have to buy Amazon SIP from Amazon. Maybe they're going to change it, but so far it's closed box. So if you're provider, trunking provider, you wouldn't be able to go that route. Anything else you can tell them before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Go, PK.
I was just going to mention on the bring your own carrier perspective, another thing that we tend to go take for granted living inside NANP, so North American numbering plan, is that we have local number portability here. There are a lot of countries in the world where there's no such thing as number portability. So if you buy a number on a provider, like you're stuck with that number forever, or stuck with that provider forever, unless you decide to forward that number to like another provider over there. And so that's a really big problem if you're, for instance, a bank and you've printed that number on a couple 100,000 credit cards. This has actually happened. And that's really where things like BYOC come into place. Is you can use all of Twilio's services from a software standpoint in terms of like having programmatic call control, using TWIML, using Flex, using Autopilot, etc., while still using your existing carrier connectivity. Or for instance, if you're doing a bunch of outbound work and you already have like an LCR set up, like you can just connect us to your existing LCR and use Flex directly, for instance. And so that's kind of, again, like our stance is we're really invested in making sure that like you have the tools to go build the use case that you need, as opposed to like focusing on more of like a lock-in piece. It's okay, like if you want to use someone else, like from a provider perspective, to do like NLU for building bots, like that's totally fine. We're happy, like, and we'll support you on that. And in fact, that's what we work on, is making it easier to kind of just do whatever you want with Twilio from a platform standpoint.
I think that Genesis approach as well, they treat it like you choose your NLU provider the way you want. So maybe you can add support for other NLUs as well. That way we're going to kind of no longer have issue of languages when you add French or Spanish. Just thinking out loud. Any other questions before we wrap this up? I look at the time. We have 20 minutes before this is officially over. We need to do draw. Any other question? Everybody wants to chip in. This part is being recorded. So
I have a quick question. How about maybe explain how to use the SMS in Twilio, but using Dialogflow?
PK, you are muted.
Sorry about that. In the past, there was an integration the Dialogflow put together where you could basically point a webhook URI from an SMS to Dialogflow, and they take that. They're deprecating that. So today, the way that you do this is you'd point your actual URI for receiving an inbound SMS to a Twilio function or to like something that you run on Google Cloud Functions or Lambda that then just proxies that message to Dialogflow and uses Dialogflow from an API standpoint. One thing I'd recommend doing is using the Conversations API with Twilio. That way you just have a nice container for SMS state. Or like if for whatever reason someone switches from SMS to a different channel, you can at least keep that context in like that container and just kind of go from there. And it also makes it easier, like if you wanted to drop off, for instance, that Dialogflow bot and then let someone just do a one-to-one conversation. It's more like just dropping an endpoint off as opposed to like changing where your webhook is sending, where the function that you receive our webhook is sending messages to. So,
Thank you.
Oh. Any other questions? We have 15 minutes. Let me put different glasses. Nothing in the chat. How many people did the form? John, did we forget anything?
Oh, sorry, I'm still here. Yeah, no, I don't think we forgot anything else. I thought that was awesome. I certainly learned a lot. I'm not a voice guy myself, so I was learning lots by listening to all that. I thought it was great. I think we've covered off all the regular agenda items. I mean, in person, we like to mingle around and chat with everyone, but it's a little more difficult on a forum like this. So if that's it for questions, we might be done.
No, before we go, I need to give a free book. So let me share the screen and then present entire screen. But guys, only 6 of you did put the name inside in the form. Do you see the form here? I sent you the link. Okay, so anybody else wants to do that? You still have time. Anybody else? Like Manning Publishing is our knowledge sponsor, and they give away books. In the past, I used to choose the books I like to read, but that was too limiting. And then Manning, what happened? They also introduced more products. Now they have live projects, so you're like sitting at home and doing the group project with somebody on so many topics. And like last time when we had a big meetup with Google developer groups, like they gave 5 products, and I was like, oh, they don't have anything for Google, only 1 book. But yet I didn't even know they did so many projects on Kubernetes and microservices running Kubernetes, and so you will be into treat if you register, because you will be able to choose anything from. Oh, this is my dashboard. I don't need to log in. Anything from their website. So.
Speaking of Kubernetes, the very first public talk that I gave was actually about container orchestration. Like way back in the days before like services like ECS, et cetera, existed. Because we built our own container orchestration service, so we can do stuff like Googling deployments, et cetera. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to see just like how much that space has like changed. I remember like Kubernetes taking forever to set up just because of how painful it was, and now it's just one-click installers. So,
I have an idea. Like you did offer like lots of credits for people wanting to try Flex, but people who want to try Twilio itself, like Phil Nash when he was here, he gave $10 credit for people whoever with code or something. Maybe for those who are interested, do the survey or let us know. Like
if you do the survey or if you shoot me an email, I drop my email in over there, and send me your account set and just mention that you were at the Serverless meetup. I can put like $50 on your account.
Generous. That's really generous. So, like it's going to take a long way. Like I just spent 20 a month, and I'm using Twilio heavily.
Yeah, use it well.
I built a latency tester on Twilio because I wanted to go test the performance of how our WebRTC endpoints were doing globally. And I spent $15,000 in like 2 hours. But I basically set up a bunch of headless testers that were running in a bunch of different locations internationally and just making hundreds of thousands of calls. So I don't think most people are going to go work through $50 that quickly. So.
Look at this, guys. I cannot find the website. Wheel of Names.
You're missing the H in wheel.
Oh my God. Okay, so let's do the draw. So let's. Oh,
We've got good odds tonight. There's not that many names in there.
No, but we have like in and out around 25 people, but like only 7 left in the names, and I will add Karla and Patrick as well. So this is just, let's go to responses. I will just pick up the names because it's going to be recorded. We're not going to go to email part. So here, and then copy, and then paste this here, and then I will add what happened here. Karla, and then any other name. Anybody wants his name in here, guys? You don't need to do the survey. Nobody? Okay, let's spin it. Is this fair? People are going to think I'm cheating.
It's rigged.
Okay, I'll give the homework. Like your son has to read the book, whatever he chooses.
Okay, I'll read him a book before bedtime.
Okay, so that's it. So we have only one draw normally at the meetups. So I think that's going to do it for the day. Congratulations on winning this. And let's see everybody's faces here. I will send the slides as soon as I receive them from you guys, and then recording when it's ready. So thanks again, everyone, and good night and be safe. And I look forward for seeing you again.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. If you have any questions.